Thank you for joining us again for another episode in our special series, Before and Happily Ever After, A Woman's Guide to Surviving Marriage. This is kind of a bucket list of things that women should do before they get married. One of the things that I've always advocated for is the preparing for marriage by working on yourself. So today we have Rhonda Richards-Smith, LCSW, joining us to talk about the importance of engaging in counseling prior to marriage in order to set yourself up for the healthiest relationship possible. So, Rhonda, thank you so much for being here. Will you be so kind as to introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. Hey, everybody. Happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me on the show. My name is Rhonda Richards-Smith, and I am a licensed psychotherapist and relationship expert based out of Los Angeles, California. And I specialize in all things personal wellness, self-care, dating, and healthy relationships.
Yes. See, this lady knows exactly what she is talking about. Look, I know that I'm a counselor, but sometimes you need to talk to somebody that's been in the game for a little bit longer. So this is my girl. I'm telling you, she's gonna have something for you. Don't take my word for it. I'm just saying she's got some wisdom for you.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So the one thing that I kind of wanted to talk about, because we are focusing on women, this is not exclusive to women. You know, it's information that men can use as well. That women can use to, kind of check in on their men and get them to check in on themselves. But focusing on us, like, what are some of the, I guess, common mental health or mental illness issues, I guess, that are more common, maybe more common or more diagnosed in women?
What I see a lot in my practice with women specifically is typically anxiety and or depression. And those oftentimes go hand in hand. So a lot of times it's both. It's both. It's anxiety and it's depression. And so it shows up a little differently for women than it does men, which can lead to some of the challenges in relationships if you are dealing with any mental health issues within your partnership, because it does show up different. You could have a couple who are both experiencing depression and it looks totally different for each of them. And it might be even hard to identify it in your partner when there might be the same targeted issue that's actually going on.
Right. That's a really good point. I think before I got married, I was diagnosed with anxiety, and my husband, it took a really long time. We've been together almost 9 years, and only within the last year, even as a counselor himself, has he been like, oh, wait a second, I think I have some of those same issues. And as you were saying, it presents differently. With him, I think he has like the stereotypical manifestations where it's like he, loses a lot of energy, he loses interest in things. He, just kind of like the whole, like, I don't want to do anything, I don't want to be here kind of presenting. Whereas my anxiety and depression manifests more in the, I have to clean all the things, but there's too much for me to clean. So then I get overwhelmed, and then I feel like I'm being a terrible wife because I can't keep things clean, and I'm upset because there's a mess, but then the mess is mine. And then I'm like, why am I so messy? Like, it's just a cycle with me. And, being able to navigate that and understand that we're both dealing with the same or similar issues, but that it's presenting differently, it's kind of like the first step in like, okay, this is what is going on. How do we address it and keep moving forward? Because I think, one, if you don't know that there's a mental health issue, you can't take the necessary steps to address it. So, we kind of talked briefly about, how we see those, mental health issues manifest in relationships. So how can the manifestation of those issues, how can it negatively affect a relationship? And, I guess talk about that both in the dating phase and then moving into the marriage phase. Like, how does that look?
I think it can be really challenging. I think especially, if you're in a space where you're dating someone, your partner may or may not be comfortable, depending on where you're at in the relationship, to even disclose that there's anything going on. Maybe they don't know, but if they do, maybe they don't feel 100% comfortable if they're dating someone to say, hey, by the way, I have PTSD, or I have some anxiety issues that I'm dealing with. So oftentimes when we're dating, it's like we want to put our best foot forward, our best face. So, we'll kind of work overtime to cover some of those things up. And that gets really tricky, because if you can only do that for so long, and as you get further down the line in your relationship, things start to fall apart. Some of those boundaries kind of fall away, and then the partner's going, well, who are you? What's going on? And so I think that's the major challenge, especially if you are dating someone that has mental health issues. I think the other piece when you're dating, and I've known many couples who are dating that have struggled with this, is if you are with somebody who's incredibly outgoing. So if you're partnered with somebody who loves to go out with people, who loves to hang out and can hang out for 4 or 5 and 6 hours at a time at somebody's house, hang out all day, all night, fight parties, football parties, basketball, whatever. Anytime there's an event, they want to be out and about. If you're paired with somebody like that and you are experiencing anxiety or depression, that can be a major issue in your relationship, because you may not feel up to being around a lot of people, especially a lot of people that you don't know. And I think that's what's really tricky. If you don't like being around a lot of people you don't know, they don't know you, they don't fully understand you, it can be an added stressor. And if you're with somebody where, they live and breathe for being out of the house, that can cause a lot of problems when you're dating and when you're married as well. If you're together with like a social butterfly, that can be really tough.
Yeah, I'm sitting up here I'm like, have you been watching me my entire life? Like, how do you know this? But yeah, that's very true. And when I first met my husband, I think I wasn't fully aware of what the anxiety diagnosis was, because full disclosure, when I went to my therapist, I was like, I'm coming for this one particular issue. This is the only thing I want to talk about, and I don't want to deal with anything else. And she very early on was like, you need to be on medication. And I was like, no, I don't need medication, because we're just having
That's not it. Yeah.
we're just having a conversation. There is no reason why I need to be medicated. We're just talking about this, because for me, accepting medication was me admitting that I had something that I had to address. Whereas, if I'm just going here and I just need a listening ear and I just need somebody to talk to, for a little while, then it's no big deal. And so when I met my husband, he was very much, these are the friends I have. Let's go do this. I want to do all the things. And I was going because I really enjoyed spending time with him. So I was going, I'm like, yeah, let's go to this house party. Let's go here. And it was, it was killing me, because I'm like, I don't want to do this, but I'm afraid to tell him no, because then he's going to lose interest in me. And, it's only been within the last, maybe 2 years, 3 years of my marriage that I felt comfortable enough saying, babe, I don't want to be around people. I just want to stay here. And him being comfortable, or me being comfortable enough with him saying, okay, well, I'm going to go, because, I need to go be with people. He's an extrovert. I'm an introvert. And I have, I need to have time to myself. I need to be alone and, just sit up and binge watch my judge shows. This is what I need to, recharge. Whereas he needs to be out and about. So with all of that said, is there a timeline or, any kind of tips for when you should feel comfortable enough, or when you should disclose to the person that you're dating that, hey, I struggle with anxiety, I struggle with depression, and let them know that this is what's going on?
I think you definitely want to be sure that there's already some emotional investment there on your part and on your partner's part as well. So, if it's someone that this is like a first date, I definitely don't think you need to disclose all of your information off the top. I don't think it's necessary. But if it's somebody you've seen a few times, if you feel like things are starting to get serious, or maybe you're considering being exclusive with them, then I think that's definitely a great time to bring it up. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think when I met him, I was 30. So I got to a point in my life where I'm like, I'm too old to waste my time and to let you waste my time. Let me let you know what's going on right now. So if you're I can't handle this, then we can part ways and I can move on to the next. Because I was like,
Yeah.
I'm 30 years old. I don't have time to, hold anything back and then later be like, oh, by the way, and 2 years in, you're like, no, no.
Yeah, that's the last thing you want to do is wait to the last second to say something. Yeah, yeah, because
Right.
and you're right. You don't want to invest too much time and energy into someone if for whatever reason it's something that they can't handle or they're very concerned about. Is better to know sooner rather than later for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
So on the other side of that, would you even consider it a red flag if someone is not disclosing, especially if you're in a long-term relationship, if they're not disclosing that there's something that they're struggling with? And I mean, I guess I asked that from the perspective of no one is perfect. Like, we all have something. But if you're with someone who is just like, oh no, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't have any shortcomings. I'm just perfect. Like, would you be, safe in saying, that might be a red flag?
Oh yeah, if someone's saying they're perfect and without fault or flaw, like yes, in my opinion, that is absolutely a red flag. Now, what I will say though is that we all have our own walk and our own journey when it comes to our physical health, when it comes to our mental health, our spiritual health and beliefs. We all have our own path with that. And so I think that we also have to acknowledge that there are some people that are a little more openly expressive about that, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
others that are not. And there may be some that just aren't aware. And over time, as you're together and you continue to grow together and in love and in your relationship, there may be some revelations that happen along the way that are more than likely, they're definitely going to change their mind for sure.
Yeah. And I think, another caveat to that is if, they're, you kind of have to be a person that they feel like they can trust you with their heart and with their deepest, darkest secrets and with their vulnerabilities. Because if you do not present yourself as a safe space for them, then that can also, be a really big hindrance to the growth that you need to have a successful relationship.
Especially for men. Especially for men. A lot of times when I talk to men, we talk about, these ideals of, male supremacy and this and that. But sometimes as women, we can perpetuate some ideas that come down from male supremacy as well, in terms of, men always, men can never cry. Men can never show any vulnerability. We can say on one end, we want to be with a guy that's sensitive, that, understands his feelings. But sometimes when we get that and they show up, it's like, oh, he's weak. Oh, he said he didn't like this or that. I feel like he's too sensitive. And so it can go both ways, even just based on, as women, how we express ourselves and how we receive our partners. So I think it's not just, it doesn't just fall on the men as their responsibility, but like you mentioned, we have to make sure that we're a safe space as well for our partners.
Do you have any tips for women on how we can kind of stop feeding into that, upholding the male supremacy kind of thing? Like, what can we do to, I guess, be a safe space for our partners?
I think, the best thing and the first thing that you need to do is understand and acknowledge your own humanity. Like, I feel like once you really understand fully and accept that you're human, it makes it so much easier to see your partner as a human being as well, who's not perfect. One of the things that I always say, especially like for parents, for people with kids, like, it's easy when you're in a parental role to say like, oh, I'm the parent, I'm this, I'm that. And you present yourself to your kids in a particular way. But sometimes we do it so much so that it would do our kids a disservice, because they don't see us as human beings. They see us as mom and dad, and we're perfect. And we never cry, and, we're never upset. And so it doesn't give them permission to be human. So I think one of the best things that we can do with everyone that we have around us is accept ourselves, take care of ourselves, understand that we're human, grant ourselves grace. And the more we grant ourselves grace, it's going to be so much easier to grant other people grace, especially our partners. But we have to acknowledge and really receive ourselves in that same light before we can do that for somebody else.
I love that. That is absolutely beautiful. Okay, so we're talking about these different issues and what we can do to kind of give grace and recognize the humanity in your partner, recognizing the humanity in yourself. Um, do you have any, I guess, additional tips or best practice efforts that you can share for people who are struggling with their mental health prior to marriage, like before they get in and, join with another person who also may be struggling, with their own issues?
I think one of the best things that you can do is to engage in self-care practices. And I know self-care is like the big buzzword, and I feel like people have like a glamorized idea of what self-care is taking a bath. We have to, lounge outside, or we're doing yoga, or whatever the case may be. And I mean, all of that may be self-care for you, which is great. I think one of the best things that you can do, though, is really learning how to set healthy boundaries for yourself. That is like one of the greatest acts of self-care that you can do, is learning how to set boundaries. And also learning how to be still with yourself. A lot of people will sometimes stay very busy and keep moving, whether it's in the house, it's outside of the house with activities, running, doing everything you can to not be alone with your feelings. So I feel like one of the best things that you can do is really train and teach yourself to be alone, to be quiet, and to really reflect on your own thoughts and your own feelings, because we get so many messages from everywhere. We get messages from media, from social media, from friends, from family, I mean, things from our childhoods that our parents may have told us, or that our caregivers told us over the years. And there's so many things that are swirling in our brains, like certain beliefs and ideas that we have, but it can be difficult as we become adults to tease out, well, do I actually believe this? Or is this something my mom told me? This is like my mom drilled in. Do I believe this? Or is this just something my best friend has told me every day this week? And so it's in my brain. So the only way to really be sure is to stop and take time for yourself to really think and really figure out how you're feeling. And I think that can also be really powerful, even for your physical health, just to make sure you're okay, because sometimes you're moving around so much, you don't know that there's a problem until you stop. But if you refuse to stop, you may never know. There have been times where I was moving a lot and I said, let me just take a break, let me stop and just relax. And I realized I had some pain in my back. Didn't notice it before then, because I kept moving and doing other things. I ignored it. And we do that a lot, especially if we're talking about people of color. We, over years and over the generations, we've just kind of learned to push past, to move through, and not think about what's bothering us. But it's oftentimes because we're not stopping to take the time to figure out what's going on. So I think that that's also really important. And those are all things that you can do, before you're even considering dating somebody or getting into a relationship or taking the next step and getting married. People often talk about losing themselves in relationships too, and not wanting to lose yourself and who you are, but you've got to check in with yourself to make sure that you're not losing yourself.
Yes. All the amens on that one. Yes. It's, I think that was one of the things when I was talking a moment ago about, being 30, and I'm like, I can't waste my time. I need to, keep moving forward because I've got to find a husband. And, by the time I was, 29 turning 30, I had given up. I'm like, okay, clearly this is not what God has for me. Like, I'm just not meant to be a wife. And I'm like, I'm just going to focus on, focus on my relationship with Christ. And when that happened, a couple of months later, I met my husband, and I'm like, oh, okay, I spent enough time, like I can move right into this relationship. And that was right around the time that I, started seeing a therapist myself. And, after continuing to be like, okay, we can talk about a little something else, addressing the different issues. And it really made me address what baggage I was taking from relationship to relationship, because before it was just like, okay, it's not me, it's the guys that I'm dating. They're not ready for me. They're not, ready for all the woman that I am. And this is why the relationships aren't working out.
You're like, these guys are trash.
Right, right. It's them. But when I met him, it was the epiphany that I had was so weird. But it was like when I met him, I was like, okay, I've got to stick to therapy because I don't feel like I'm the wife that he needs me to be. And then immediately I was like, even if this relationship doesn't work out, I don't think I'm the woman that I deserve. And that's
Absolutely.
what kept me in therapy, to try to address all of the things that I had been carrying. And like you were saying, the constant moving, not having to sit in the quiet with my own thoughts, and to be, self-reflective of, okay, these dudes are probably trash. They are trash. They were definitely trash. But, what is it about me that is accepting this, that is, constantly pulling the same kind of man? Because there's something in me, there's something broken in myself that is attracting this kind of person.
Yeah,
And
and even when you attract them, you're choosing to stay, So I mean, even
right,
if you're dating them for the first time, you're eventually you're making the choice to stick around.
right.
And so, yeah, absolutely.
And like you were talking about, learning how to, establish boundaries even before you go into marriage. Um, that was one of the things that I was very guilty of, was because I was so fixated on, I have to get married. Like, that is my end game, is to be somebody's wife. I had no boundaries. Like, I accepted, mental abuse. I accepted emotional abuse. I accepted, an incident of physical abuse, because I'm like, it's, I can put that to the side. It's just the consequence of, I need to be somebody's wife. So I can deal with all these other things as long as I'm meeting my end goal. You mentioned like self-care kind of being a buzzword. And when you were saying that, I was thinking, oh yeah, like the other buzzword that I'm seeing lately is, my partner is a narcissist, or how do I know that my partner is a narcissist? One, have you examined yourself or talked to somebody to see if you have narcissistic tendencies? And
Absolutely.
then two, when you're saying that someone is a narcissist, is their behavior narcissism, or is it simply because you have not established boundaries and they're doing all of these things that you are accepting and choosing to allow them to do?
Absolutely. And also, are you trauma bonding? Which is the
Yeah.
other piece of that as well. Is the way that they treat you, is that attractive because maybe that's what you learned love should look like as a child, which is the next thing. And it's easy to blame your partner and be like, oh, they're doing this and that. But is there something within you, like I mentioned, which is allowing you to choose that person again and again, or that type of person?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're someone who feels like, oh, I always draw narcissists, that's definitely a red flag. That's
Yeah.
definitely a red flag that on some level, maybe subconsciously, you're choosing to be with folks like that.
Yeah. That's a big one, is the trauma bonding. And we definitely do not talk about that enough. Within our community, we're doing good to get us to go see a counselor, but not talking about the trauma bonding. And I think, if we want to put it in, biblical terms, talking about breaking generational curses. And, we see, I've talked to, people and clients about, the when you stay in abusive relationships or you stay in traumatic situations, you're teaching your children that this is what love looks like, that this is what a healthy relationship looks like, and that it is okay to remain in this situation. Even if you are in an abusive relationship, at least they love me. They may hurt me sometimes, but this is how they show me they love me. And that is, a very layman's definition of trauma bonding. And setting yourself up to continually accept these behaviors, and to not put those boundaries in place and say, I deserve more than this. My life and my safety are worth more than this. um
Yeah. And when we
and
talk about like generational curses and patterns too, I think it's the other piece of that that's really difficult sometimes is that, if you maybe have a different belief, or you feel like, there's something about this that's not right, it can feel very isolating. And that's the reality, is that, even if you do know what's wrong, or you do feel in your gut, like something tells me this isn't right. It's tough. It's tough to break it. It's tough to be the person
oh
who's going to
yeah.
break the curse, or that's going to break the pattern, because it'd be very isolating. Because if all of your family, if this is their belief, why are you changing up? Why do you feel like you're better? You have to be different. What is that about? It can be isolating with your friends if they share those beliefs too. So, I think it's one thing to identify it and know it for yourself. It's another thing to kind of deal with the repercussions and maybe some of the judgment that you might experience from family or friends if you choose to approach relationships and the way that you take care of yourself a little differently than they do. It's hard.
Oh yeah, it is. And if you ever want to talk about being a courageous woman, or shattering ceilings, it's something as it can be something as intimate as stopping trauma bonding, as breaking a generational curse, or having the faith to say, this is not right. And even though everyone I know believes that this is right, this is not right for me, in my
Yep.
health, in my safety, and in my sanity, and I'm choosing to walk away. And I think, having a counselor or a therapist to walk along that path with you is so critical to being able to do that for yourself, to make sure that you are the healthiest person that you can be going into a relationship, going into a marriage, and having the wisdom and the discernment to see if the person that you're going into a relationship or a union with, being able to discern if they are not healthy for you, and having the courage to walk away from that as well.
Absolutely. And it doesn't make them a bad person. People feel like, oh, if I decide I don't want to be with them because of this and it doesn't work for me, they're not a bad person. And it's not about somebody being a bad person or an evil person per se. They just may not be the person for you. And it's okay to it's okay to let go. It's okay to let go.
Yes. And I'm gonna talk about myself. I think the reason why I'm so adamant about having these conversations is because I have so much relationship trauma, and a lot of it is because I knew that someone was not healthy for me. It was not the relationship for me, but because my own, I guess, objectives were not the healthiest, I was willing to put up with so much stuff, just to be like, it's okay, I made it. I've, won the prize of a wedding ring, that I, allowed that kind of trauma in my life because I was not willing to walk away when I knew that this person was not good for me. There was one guy in particular, I met him and we talked, and in the first conversation, he was like, oh, well, yeah, I'm an Aries and I'm a Pisces woman. And I knew, look, I'm dead serious. I knew in that conversation, I was like, this is not going to work. I dated that dude for a year and a half, and that was the most traumatic relationship I've ever been in my life. And I knew from the first conversation, I'm like, this is not going to work. And I walked into it anyway.
And it's hard. And it's hard sometimes too, when you feel like you've had some history with somebody. So you've been with somebody for a year or 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. And, sometimes it's like, well, I've been here so long, I don't want to rock the boat. I know who they are. It's almost like, the devil versus the devil you don't.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I know who they are. I know what they're about. I know what to expect. And even if it's going to be a mess here and there, I know when it's coming and what it's going to look like. And so it can be difficult. And there are some folks that just stay together also just because they've been together for X number of years, and to be able to say, oh, I've been married for 10 years. Oh, I've been married for 20 years. We love to hear that. Somebody, oh, you've been married, 60 years. We're a sucker for that. Like,
yeah,
tell me how you made it work. But the reality is everybody that's been married 50, 60 years, 20 years, 30 years isn't necessarily in a healthy, happy relationship either. So we can't just use time or things like that to judge a relationship like a book by its cover. We have no idea what's going on.
Right.
And so it's never too late if you decide for whatever reason, based on where you are, that a relationship is not working. You do not have to stay and suffer. You really don't. You don't.
Right. There's a lady named Leslie Bernick. I met her several years ago it was the American Association for Christian Counselors. And, before I met her, the only reason I knew of, divorce in the Bible was for infidelity. And so it took a lot for me, because I'm like, I don't understand how, God would be okay with someone staying in an abusive relationship, or being with someone who is, financially committing like financial infidelity or financial abuse, like all of these different things. And I'm like, I don't understand how God is okay with that. And I, met Leslie Vernick because I was like, I want to, listen in on what she has to say. And the topic she was discussing was emotionally destructive relationships. And I was like, this is going to be good. It's going to be real good. And I mean, it was. And, so that kind of changed my mindset when I would see people who had been divorced, and I'll talk about my parents. They got divorced a month before their 30th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't understand what's going on. But in that particular situation, like from the time I was in 5th grade, I knew my dad was cheating on my mom. So she had dealt with infidelity for years. And, it was this one last affair that she was like, I'm done. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. And it was so bad. Like, we almost lost everything as a family because of this. And she was like, I'm done. So before it would have been like, oh, you've been married 30 years. You have to stay together. And not understanding, like you were saying, there's stuff that's going on behind the scenes. Even in my own household, I only saw the tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
And, she was just like, I'm done. I'm out. And, I fully supported my mom. And, they stayed apart 7 years and they got remarried, after they worked all those issues out. But it was a thing where it was like, I love this man, but I love myself more. And
absolutely.
my children are grown. They're out of the house. I'm done.
Yeah.
And
you can love somebody, you can care about them, and you can still let them go. It's like all of those things can be happening at the same time. And even if like it's in this case where it may be temporary while they work out some other details or some other things. And I think and I think it's so courageous that she did that too, because it's also an acknowledgement that she can't do all the work herself.
Yeah.
He's got to do some work too. And I think in relationships, a lot of times we focus so much on like women and like, women, how can we better ourselves, which is incredibly important. I speak to that much of the time in my career. Like, what can we do as women to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, that we're considering our boundaries and relationships? Men have to do this work too. If we're partnered with men have some work to do when it comes to their own self-care, their own thoughts and feelings, and how they show up in relationships too, because it's their responsibility also. Absolutely.
Whew. Look, I told y'all at the beginning of this, Rhonda was going to tell you something. She was going to get your whole life together. What has happened? I'm telling you. Rhonda, do you want to add anything else? I could sit here and talk with you all day. There's so much that we can talk about, but we got to go do some work. We got to be about the business. But, please, if there's anything else that you would like to share, with our listeners to help them, do the best that they can to really prepare themselves for marriage.
Yeah, I just think, it's easy to idealize different people that we see, whether it be in the media or maybe family members. It might be like our parents or friends. It's easy to idealize relationships and think, wow, like that's the perfect relationship. Like I want my relationship to look just like that. But the reality is there is no such thing as a perfect relationship. There are no perfect people on this planet as far as I'm concerned. And so, I think the focus needs to be less on maybe emulating someone else's relationship and more on figuring out what kind of relationship you want. Your relationship doesn't have to look like my relationship, and that's okay. And I think just really getting a deeper understanding of that the way that you live your life is ultimately your choice. It's not a group decision. It's not a group decision on how you choose to live your life. And things can feel that way. You might have to feel like you got to, consult with the group chat, or you got to ask your parents, can you do this? Or, is this acceptable? But as an adult, at the end of the day, your life and your life path is really your responsibility. And what you don't want to do is seek partnership with someone that you wouldn't be interested in. Right. Or live your life in a way where, when you get to the end of the road, when you get toward the end of your life, you go, how did I get here? You don't even realize how you got there because it's not really what you would envision. It's not what you wanted. And so if you're not careful, you'll end up living somebody else's life or the life someone else wanted you to live. So you really want to be intentional about everything that you do when it comes to taking care of yourself and when it comes to what you're looking for in a relationship and in a partner.
Yes.
Be brave. Be brave. It's hard, but just be brave.
Yes, bravery is an incredible thing, and it is, something to be applied across all the spectrums. Um, I love it. Thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough, but I will try to say thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It was
Yeah,
fun.
I sincerely appreciate you taking time out of your day to, sit and chat with us and give us some, incredibly important and sage advice on how we can better ourselves and really be in charge of our mental health and self care. As it relates to being who we need to be in every aspect of our lives. If you wouldn't mind, please let everyone know where they can find you on social media, and make sure they stay in tune, stay tuned into you to get more of this incredible advice.
Sure. So my website is rhondasmithlcsw.com, and you can find me across all social media platforms at Rhonda Smith, LCSW.
And we are Yoked, Be Yoked on Instagram. And you can find our website, Being Yoked. Make sure you like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can get updates on when we post our new videos. Thank you again, and I hope y'all have an amazing day, and we will talk to you soon. Love.